Hey, here we go with X's and O's on the KFAN Minnesota Vikings Radio Network. It's Paul Allen with Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell. And this presentation at KFAN and the Vikings Radio Network and Vikings.com is courtesy of the Minnesota Lottery. And here come the Indianapolis Colts on Saturday. I'm going to discuss this with Keenan McCardell, the wide receivers coach, to join us in a little bit. But the NFL scheduling process, it's random, certain facets of it, but it's like you're a 10-3 team. The Indianapolis Colts are 4-8-1. Well, obviously, when the schedule comes out, nobody knows that you're going to be 10-3 and they're going to be 4-8-1.
Yeah.
But here you come into a game, no Bradbury, no Smith, no Zadarius. Hopefully, they're all back Saturday, and they're off a bye at this stage of the season. So it's just the way the schedule falls. It's something you can't control. But nevertheless, you're going to get a group that's had a chance to rest a little bit. You're trying to get the shirts and the hats, as you like to say, and win a division. But it's just that's a quirky nature of the schedule and the way it falls.
Yeah, it's every year there's things that I know the schedule makers try to do the best job they can to keep things fair and balanced. But ultimately, between an early trip to London and where our primetime games fell, where our Thanksgiving game fell, and now we'll play back-to-back Saturdays, it all kind of pieces together. And in the end, PA, it's just about preparing, regardless of the circumstances, trying to prepare your team to go out and play well and try to win a football game.
Yeah, I never bring up with you the process of things happening in games and sending in plays and where that goes. I did make the mistake 2 months ago with Mike Pettin of saying it was a fruitless venture. And he's like, well, no, it's not. I mean, that's the process and that's what you do and things like that. He's a little more old school than you. But like the Jefferson play that in front of the Lions bench that was a touchdown, and you can't challenge it. And it's a major part of the game. Did you sleep okay after that?
Yeah, I mean, the things that tend to keep me up at night are more the critical errors that we could have controlled as a team. And
that's a good point.
Things that we could have done better as a coaching staff, or I could have done better. I always like to reflect that way first. But no doubt when, we've had a few times this year, either the 12 on the field where it's in a portion of the game where I can't do much about it, or no doubt when they do blow a play dead. We've been told that those should be officiated in a way where if you know, and blow the whistle and blow it dead. We've since found out that was not to be the case and maybe took a quick strike off the board for us that may or may not have changed circumstances in that football game. We didn't do enough to win the game, but that would have been a play that ultimately a momentum type of play from your best player in a time in the game where you're just trying to fight and scratch and claw to possibly draw that thing back to even and then see where we're at from there, and just never could quite get it done.
Is it fair to say, respectfully, that with some of these yardage numbers defensively you're giving up, the team is giving up, that a better pass rush would better protect the secondary and help the totality of the defense? Just is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think they really do work hand in hand. And I think the times where the rush maybe gets an advantage and Z or Daniil or Dalvin Tomlinson get on an edge and have a chance to affect the quarterback, the ball comes out quick. Or maybe it's the time where they don't get quite the rush we want, or maybe that rush pattern's not as dialed in as we want, and the quarterback gets a few more hitches to assess the coverage. And it can be a lot of things, snap in and snap out. What we've got to try to do is just tighten up the coverage, be a little bit more solid with our rush plan, activate some pressures here and there when we can to try to dictate a little bit more. And I think that's kind of one of the messages that, I think our team needs right now is we want to dictate in any regard, to the opponent a little bit more. I think we've done it at times on offense throughout the year, either with the run or pass game, and our pass game with some of the weapons we have and our quarterback playing at a high level. Can do that to a lot of opponents. I want to see other facets of our team, special teams, take advantage of some more situations and try to dictate a little bit more. It's hard to do in the NFL. Teams are very well coached. Teams have really good players, but we feel strongly about both our players and coaches here to find ways to do that in a football game.
And what I'm getting at here is that, I'd called games involving Zadarius Smith with Green Bay in the past, and I know how impactful he is, and when he's out, like what happens to the totality of Green Bay's defense when he was there. Like, I'm not saying Preston Smith would fall off, but having the complimentary guy certainly doesn't hurt.
Yep.
And man, just being around Zadarius this year, and in all my time doing this, he's one of the toughest guys I've ever come across.
Yeah.
You know, that one game at home, I can't remember what it was, might have been Dallas, limps out, and then comes back in or wherever it was and gave his best and left again. And I guess what I'm getting at here is with Zadarius, given how key he truly is to the equation, even in a team game, is he getting different attention off the 9.5 sacks, or are the bumps and bruises just something through which he needs to play?
Yeah, I think it's just a long season. He's played a lot of snaps, but at the same time, I think teams are recognizing his ability to quote unquote wreck the game.
Right.
And he does see a lot of double teams. If he's out on the edge, you know, they're constantly chipping and using tight ends or backs to potentially try to affect his ability to get a straight rush. We move him around a lot. We try to get him isolated on different people on the offensive line, but ultimately, you bring up a great point. And if they're going to be sending resources to 55, that's when we need some of the other guys to show up, and they have.
Yeah.
At times this year, we just got to be a little bit more consistent with that, and then the back end plays a role in that. Can we be a little bit more competitive? Can we take some of the air out of the coverages and make things just a little bit harder on people as the season goes on and your self-scout is out there? There's tape to watch and study. We got to be ready to make some adjustments as well.
You know, and it's like a complete overhaul, period, or at this stage of the season would be completely unrealistic.
Yep.
It's an unrealistic take if anybody has it. In fact, Bill Belichick, who brought you into the league, up to tonight, Monday's game against Arizona in his press conference, they were hitting him about the offense, and he's like, look, we're too late into this thing to change everything. And then I was kind of thinking about our defense and, you know, just some things that I would imagine you would like to see better. But at this stage of the equation, it's tough. How difficult is it, shall I say, to make dramatic changes at this stage of the equation?
Well, I think there's really three phases to it. First and foremost, personnel. Are we doing everything we can to activate different personnel, use guys' skill sets to help try to gain advantages here and there? And then the other phase would be schematically. And what do we look like? What is Matt Ryan, for instance, this week going to stand back there on a critical third down? What is he going to see? What is he going to feel?
Yeah.
How can we kind of steal a page out of our offensive playbook where we try to have a lot of things start out looking the same but are ultimately different? The original intent of what we wanted things to be versus what has actually played out. And now what little tweaks and fundamental changes can we make? You know, maybe use different players, not necessarily in different roles and responsibilities, but maybe just matchups more and doing some things to help with the pass rush, maybe sending some pressure, maybe dropping out more in coverage, whatever it is, just constantly changing things and spinning the dial, but in a way where our guys can be comfortable with it. PA is probably the most thing, and I think that's what Coach Belichick's talking about is a complete overhaul on a short week at this point in the season. Probably not likely, but it's our job as coaches to find whatever ways we can to help our guys.
You know, and a couple of Mondays ago at the Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee night here at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, I emceed, Kevin was there. And when I said, you know, in all my years of doing this, just hearing so many things in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, and just kind of sitting back and then watching them develop, it's been beautiful. I mean, I've really enjoyed so much of it. And that would include, I remember Mike Tice teams where the offense with Culpepper, Moss, and so on, dramatically better than the defense, and they would lose high-scoring games. Some years with Zimmer, the defense was better than the offense, and they would lose certain types of games. And with this group, at least from what I know or what I see, is you don't have offense complaining about defense.
No.
You know what I'm saying? It's just, that's a nice, that like I talked to Adam Thielen recently at a Toys for Tots thing, and it just, everybody supports everybody and encourages everybody. And, you know, granted, there needs to be admonishing at times and discipline for those who ain't playing well or ain't listening, but nevertheless, that tightness, I mean, that's what you have, right?
Yeah, I think it comes back to a good culture, and a positive work environment doesn't necessarily mean things are always, smiles and an extra scoop of ice cream at lunch. It's not like that. What it is that we've provided ourselves with the opportunity, as I tell our players, to coach them hard, to speak directly to the why behind either what it's going to take to win a game, or ultimately why we did not do that, and how do we fix it? How do we find answers to provide for our players as coaches, and then ultimately as players, to really challenge yourself on a daily basis. Are you doing everything you can to be prepared from a technique, fundamentals, knowing the calls, knowing the checks, so that we have no self-inflicted wounds? We play the call, we play with great technique and fundamentals, and in that, adding a little bit of maybe dictating a little bit more when we can. I feel really strongly, and we'll always have confidence in our guys to go out there and execute and do enough to give ourselves a chance to win football games.
Offensively, defensively, or special teams, what I've seen now through 13 is you're not afraid to pull a guy out of the game if he's not listening and doing it right. And it's nothing personal here, and we'll dust ourselves off and do it again next week. But that's kind of part of it too. It's nothing personal. We're trying to get to the Super Bowl, man. And Indy is the next task. Lastly here, Kevin. Indy's weird. Allowed Dallas to score 54, but 2 weeks before that, lost by 1 to Philly. They haven't allowed more than 227 passing yards in 2 months. DeForest Buckner is a monster. You would know from the Niners days, potentially. But just the Colts, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, I think they're incredibly well coached on the defensive side. I think Gus Bradley does a really good job with that group. You talk about some of those players up front. They add Ngakoue that can be a real focal point on the edge to affect the game, and then you also look at Defoe. DeForest Buckner, I think, is one of the premier 3 techniques, those defensive tackles in the league. We've played some really good ones this year, and he'll fall right up in line with those guys and can really change the game. You got to know where he is. You got to account for him. Kwity Paye on the other side is a young, developing pass rusher as well. They go out and get Gilmore to try to, be their quote-unquote shutdown corner, and he's really lived up to that this year. And then they've got some really good, and even though they've kind of lost their true Mike linebacker that they've had for a few years, they've still got some athletic, talented players. Kenny Moore is a really solid nickel. So when you look at this group, just consistent, solid. They do the technique and fundamental things well. They tackle well. They run to the football every single snap. So you've got to be on from a standpoint of your scheme is one thing, but the effort and the strain and finish of all 11 is really what will determine your ability to sustain success against a group like this. So it's going to be a heck of a challenge for us, but one I think our offense is continuing to try to find our pure identity of consistent 4 quarters of run and pass game. I had some really flashy, good moments in the pass game last week. I thought Kirk, Justin, Adam, KJ, and TJ all, really came together to make some plays to try to keep us in that football game when maybe we didn't have our best as a team. Like to see some of that carry over and get Dalvin Cook and Alexander going again in the run game and see if we can put one together.
For those at Vikings.com, in closing, this holiday set they have here, have the chairs a little farther away than usual.
That's right.
God bless, and best of luck against the Colts, okay?
Yeah, thank you, PA.
Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm Paul Allen. Wide receivers coach Keenan McCardell is next on the KFAN Minnesota Vikings Radio Network.